What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. That is Mike Fuji up top. I am Al Norfleet, and together we are at the 50 with Fuji and Fleet. Now, we've been away for a couple of weeks, but we're back today, and what a show we have for you today. We have a young man. Well, we have I'm going to say young man.
I'll take it. I'll take anything I can get.
We have a young man that mainly the story is about. He used to live in the bottom of veteran stadiums for a few years back in the days. He is also a former airborne ranger, special forces officer that served as 18 leader in Vietnam in 1968. Welcome, Tom Garvey.
Hi, guys.
How are you, Tom?
I'm well.
Mr. Garvey, welcome to the show. Thank you. We appreciate your service. You know, it's almost Veterans Day coming up, so thank you to you and Al for serving in the military.
Thank
you, sir. Yes, sir. My pleasure.
It's Dallas week, and let me ask you, Tom. I mean, how did you pull it off living in the vet for 3 years?
I had a job there. I had a job. I had a reason. I had a legitimate reason for being in the building. But in the vet, like the Sixers had their offices in there, the Phillies, so they had people year round in and out. And then on the fourth floor, up by the Stadium Club, was Leonard Toast had the Eagles offices, and they also had the mayor's, not the mayor, but the mayor's box. And there was a commissioner of Parks and Recreation in Philadelphia assigned just to what they refer to as the Philadelphia Sports Complex, which was all the ground where the Spectrum, the Vet, and also at that time, the JFK Stadium, which would hold 105,000 people for football. And they used to have the Army-Navy game there until they moved it over to the Vet. So my job was for all parking for everything there. So I had not just the Phillies and Temple and the Eagles in the Vet, and most people had that. So they were around more at that time. But Peg, your phone. Sorry.
No problem. No problem.
It's our son calling. They had, but my responsibility was for parking every car for every event. So I also had everything at the Spectrum, the Spectrum had over 250 events a year, roughly. And I met Lou Scheinfeld when we were doing speaking together at something. And Lou was telling me, and I think it's in his book, that every day the Spectrum was dark, when there was nothing going on there, they lost $5,000. Peg, can you move out? I can hear you. Okay. So I also had to remove snow from the lots, and I also had to do trash pickup, which if you saw what the lots looked like back in the 70s after an Eagles game, it looked like outside the wall of Troy after the siege of Troy, or something like that. I mean, I was happy I never found bodies out there when we cleaned the lot. You know, we found everything. You just can't, we don't need to go there, but you can imagine. You've probably seen it. So I had all those things. So if I rarely had a day off, rarely. And I had people that worked for me. I could get away if I needed to, but I was usually there. And I hid in plain sight. I just was there in front of everybody, and they just took it for granted because I had so many things going. I had an office with a key from the outside, and there were two rims of the Vet on the Broad Street level, where the Phillies offices were. You might remember that. They had all the offices from the outside into where you'd go into that inside concourse. Then there was an underground where you were open for about 40 or 50 feet wide, and the concession stands and the men's rooms and ladies' rooms were all on that rim around the 200 level. And I had, out of the back of my office, I could get through into that level. And on the other side, there was a concession stand that they were no longer using. When the vet was built, they had outlined 60 concession stands, 48 for food and drink and 12 for novelties. Then the other spaces were men's rooms or ladies' rooms. So all the space between one of those alcoves going out to the seats on the 200 level was to the next one over was the size of all these rooms. And I had one of them. It was a novelty stand that didn't make any money and wasn't worth operating because it was out in left field and they didn't have as many seats for baseball, the primary, venue at the vet, 80 some games, because they don't have any 200 level. But for football, they uncover those seats and pull them out. It's like bleacher seats, on that side of the field, in the whole outfield. So I stored some furniture in my room for one of the tight end for the Eagles who didn't think his coach liked him enough. There was a new coach. Vermeil hired a new coach in 79, I guess spring of 79. And this guy had never played professional ball. He played in high school, played in high school and college, but coached a little bit in college, but never won the professional level. So he was treating this guy, and his name was Richard Osborne. Ozzie was, all Texas. He won his high school. Robert E. Lee in San Antonio won the high school championship that year. The quarterback on his team when he was in high school was Tommy Kramer, who I think ended up with the Vikings. Am I right? Vikings?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Correct.
So you can imagine those two on a high school level playing together. And Ozzie came up, was drafted by the Jets, and then he got cut after he caught a touchdown pass from Namath in a preseason game, and Namath took him out on the town. And you can only imagine what that would have been like. And
Right.
he got traded to the Eagles, and he'd been there a while, and he was a backup to Keith Krepley. But he just thought, my days are numbered. This guy's not going to. And he was right. Ozzie called me from Westchester, he said he just got the Turk called, and he said, come down to the office and bring your playbook. And Ozzie, it's a one-way trip for the playbook. And, he was going to give him his papers. So I picked him up in Westchester, took him to Sizemore's. Ann Sizemore, Jerry said she was still in Texas with his two kids, and there was a key under the flower pot. So we went over there and played pool, drank beer, and listened to the Rolling Stones playing You Don't Always Get What You Want over and over again. And I took him for a red eye about 2:00 in the morning. Ozzie got picked up 4 weeks later by the Cardinals. And there's a story in the book about that when he came back to Philadelphia to play against the Eagles wearing a Cardinals uniform.
Don't go into that just yet.
Okay, I won't steal any of your thunder. Yeah. So let's see, where was I then? So that's kind of what was happening, But then when I took him on the plane, last thing I said to him, he's going down the ramp, and this was 1979, I guess. You could go into the airport. You can't do that anymore. So I'm there waving to him as he's leaving. He's got his arm around the first class stewardess who's upgraded him to first class. They're making eyes at each other. Typical Ozzie. And I yell, Oz, what your furniture? What do you want me to do with it? He says, I don't care. He said, put it in Vermeil's office and set it on fire. Put it in the 50-yard line. I'm happy. And he left town with a bag in his, the bag, the clothes on his back. He came back as a Cardinal. But I had all this stuff. And that's the year the Pope came to town. And the Pope came to town, I think, on the 3rd or 4th of October. So I had 2 days. I had 2 days when there are no events anywhere. I could go down the shore. I'm heading up Broadway, happy as hell for the bridge. And a voice in the radio says the city planners have decided for the Pope's, inaugural mass on Logan Square, there may be as many as 1 million people coming. They had no idea what the crowd there was going to be, and they weren't selling tickets. So it was also a regular working day. It wasn't like a holiday where nobody would be coming to the office. So you had all that stuff going on. And all my kids that worked in the parking lot were high school kids. And the supervisors were guys in their 30s with a family that had as an extra job. They'd come down. They would supervise each of the gates. But they all had jobs. So I had nobody. And they're saying that they said, if you're coming, we're going to open Vet Stadium at 4:00 in the morning. I'd never done that. And they said, park there, take the subway up to City Hall, and walk the short distance up to the Parkway to the Logan Circle. Good for them, bad for me. I was so mad, I almost hit a guy. I ran a light, almost hit a guy. I mean, I was screaming and yelling in the car. So I had to get a crew. I had nobody. I went down to South Street to J.C. Dobbs, rock and roll bar on 3rd and South. I was well known there. I went in there and I told Seamus, the bouncer, I said, I need a crew. So we recruited a crew of guys that I've been sneaking in over the years. I snuck so many people into games there. It was obscene. I mean, for the World Series in 1980, for every one of those games, I smuggled at least 80 to 100 people through my door. I mean, it was insane, but it was fun, whatever. And I had Ozzie's furniture. So I said, look, Seamus, we'll get the crew together, but I don't trust these guys to show up sober with their clothes on at 4:00 in the morning. He said, you're right, they won't. So I had a sleepover at the vet. We're laughing about this. And so I took them to J.C. Dobbs the night before, bought them beer and burgers upstairs at the upstairs bar for about an hour, hour and a half. We all got in cabs and we caravanned down to the vet, and I locked them into the vet, and I put most of them in the storage area where I had Ozzy's furniture. And in the dark, Michael McNally from the electric factory, he's gone now from there, but Mike McNally in the dark said, you know, if you just cleaned up this room and rearranged the crap you got in here, this would be the coolest apartment in the world. I'd never thought of it. I didn't think of it. So I did. And that was the first night I slept at the vet, and I didn't move out. And I really made it a nice apartment. I brought everything I needed. I had a refrigerator. I had everything I needed to cook. I had a bed. I had a table, chairs. The whole thing was set up. And I had the whole floor area where we were was AstroTurf carpet, because that's the year that they redid the vet with a new AstroTurf. Mm-hmm. And so there were rolls of it. And I went downstairs and asked them, I said, there it is. Take all you want. And I did. It was beautiful. And it was really a cool bachelor pad. I mean, you guys, either of you could have lived there and probably would have. And that's a note I have in the beginning of my book, and I can read that to you for your people there, because that kind of that sets up the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can I do that now? Just read
it.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. This is how the book begins. If I overheard anyone telling this story in a bar or a party, I wouldn't believe it either. But I must confess I'd probably scooch a little closer, eavesdropping, unable to walk away. I'd have to find out how this yarn unraveled. Let's begin an implausible story with a seemingly simple yet complex question. If you were single, never married, with no children or dependents, would you, if you had the opportunity, have lived on the down low in a secret apartment in the sports teams that you loved as a child since you were 8 years old? In this proposal, we have an off-the-wall South Beverly version of the Phantom of the Opera. But the larger notion this question begs could easily challenge the inner demons of sports fans anywhere. If you had an opportunity to live in a major sports stadium of the team you grew up loving, what would you have done? In my case, I could, so I did.
Now,
fire
can
away.
Can you see this?
Yes.
You see my highlighted?
Yes.
That's what I had wrote about. If you were singing, I was going to ask you to expound on that a little bit.
Well, I didn't get married till I was 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 50. And I think it was three months short of my 51st birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Just made the cut. Now,
let me ask you a question. You don't answer about 20 of my question, but
okay. Sorry.
No problem. In the dedication of the book,
yeah,
the secret apartment is dedicated to everyone who worked at Veterans Stadium in any capacity,
yes,
or at any level in putting on the show. And
yes,
for the fans who suffered bad weather, bad press, heartbreaking season with courage and grace. Why was it important for you to make that dedication?
Well, I had to dedicate it to somebody, and I love the fans. If you remember the game, the coldest game in the stadium, it was in January when they beat the Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl. Okay, the 1980 Super Bowl, and I'd come in from the lot, and I was walking around the 600 level. There's a ramp that went right. It was outside and went right around the stadium. And it was between the 500 level, which was a small level, and the 600 level. And I'm walking around there, and that's when Wilbert broke through center and started down the field. Now, when I looked down there, I could see Jerry Sizemore owned Too Tall Jones. He owned him. He took him and pushed him in a big arc to the right out of the play. When Wilbert got through the line, Two-Tone didn't take one step towards him because there was no point. Wilbert was gone. He was hitting full speed, and Two-Tone was standing there like a fool. Jerry really took care of him. But when that started, when Wilbert went through the line, I looked down and I knew I'd see this again on film. But I also knew that something else was happening, and I'd never see that again live. So I turned and looked up through the 600 level seats, and it was the greatest view because these people, I could have set myself on fire and they wouldn't have even noticed me. These people were lit up like Eagles fans that were hungry for this moment all their lives. All the stuff I listened, the weather, the press, whatever. All those things that they'd put up with all those years, bad seasons and so forth. But in this moment, they were so beautiful and they were so excited. It was like children on Christmas morning. And I just stood there and watched them. I watched the fans that whole run. And then I looked back at the field and I saw he'd scored. But you could see whoever was going to get to the goal line from there. He was free. There was a hole that he went through that was it was classic. And you can look at that. You can pull that up on YouTube or something like that and look at that. But if you ever do, check out Jerry Sizemore and check out he and Too Tall Jones, because Too Tall he was not a factor.
I would say definitely one of the top 10 Eagles plays of all time over Montgomery. Tom, I wanted to touch on, I saw an interview you did when you would, I think one of your favorite things when you lived in the vet was rollerblading up to the 700 level. Can you
roller skate. I didn't have roller blades. I had roller skates. In fact, I had Terry Totolo's skates because he wasn't allowed to skate during the season, but he always had skates with him. So he gave them to me for the whole season. And these were regular leather skates, for outdoors with all kinds of track, all the wheels and all that, because he was from Long Beach and he and his girlfriend, they roller skated like crazy. They were beautiful skates, but they were regular roller skates. And I had those skates on. It was fun. Those ramps were hell.
All right. I remember. Also, I think in an interview I saw that you came in one night and I guess you fell asleep.
Oh yeah, that's the only time I got caught.
And the security guard, a dog, I guess it was a German Shepherd, came
Axel,
up to you with the security guard.
I think its name was Axel, but I don't trust my memory on that foot. But I think it was Axel because I knew the dogs. Right. I mean, I used to come through security all the time and pet the dogs and give them dog bones and stuff like that because I knew if they knew my smell and they ever were taken for a walk around the stadium at night and smelled me, they wouldn't be going crazy like they would with somebody else's smell.
Right.
And Axel knew me. Yeah, I came back from J.C. Dobbs, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was pretty lit up, and it was a full moon, so I wasn't going to skate because I had a lot to drink. And I went out into center field right behind second base where the dirt stops around second base and the AstroTurf begins. If you walk about 20 feet out into center field, that's where I was. And I sat down, I was looking at the full moon, I laid on my back, and it was really nice, beautiful night. It was set up for baseball, but I don't think the team was in town. And I woke up about 6 o'clock in the morning. The weather had changed enough so there was a haze rolling across the field. It was like a scary movie. I mean, it was, mist about 6 feet high. And in the mist, I woke up with something wet in my ear. And it was Axel licking my head and face and ear. And I sat up and it was a halo of light. And it was a security guard. And the first words out of his mouth, he started laughing and he goes, "Oh, it's you." And I just knew I was safe, So right. We sat up and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I got too much to drink." And he said, "Go wherever it is you go and sleep it off." Because he knew I went somewhere. He knew something was going on. He just wasn't messing with it. Mm-hmm. And I started to walk away, and Axel, the dog, started following me. And, he had to call Axel, and Axel stopped and looked at him and looked at me and was sad. And then Axel trotted back to him, and I went up and went to bed in the secret apartment. That's the only time anybody ever got me, though.
Now, you have a chapter called "You Always Remember Your First Time."
Oh, yeah, that's an expression.
Tell us about your first time at the vet.
It was beautiful. The vet, see, when I went to college after Vietnam, I worked a full-time job. And at that time, I was working the graveyard shift, midnight to 8 at Westinghouse, second floor of the blade shop down in Leicester, below the airport. So I had that job. And I through college, and then I was a full-time day student in college, so I never had any time. So the vet opened the first week in April, I think, and my brother had been up there a couple times. And when I graduated on the 10th of May, he said, "Let's go up to a game. The Phillies are in town next week, and for a long stand. He said, let's go up to a game and get a hot dog and a beer and relax." And and I was all up for that. I thought that was great. So we go up there and we're walking out of the parking lot towards the building. And I said, "Where are our seats?" And Kevin says, "We don't have seats." I said, "What?" I said, "You don't have tickets?" He goes, "No, we don't need tickets." And we went down that ramp, the truck ramp over by. It was pretty steep. and you could back a tractor trailer down there. And sometimes they did when they unloaded a big load of something coming in. I mean, the guy running the stadium, the concessions, is our cousin, Pat. And we're saying Pat Nylon's name, and he wouldn't do anything for us. And somebody walked by in the background we knew, and he called him. And he said, "Hey, get Pat. You know, we've got an issue here." So he came over to the security guard, and he said, "Oh, no, they're good. They're with me, you know." So the security guard, he's a little pissed about the whole thing. But we went in, and we're talking to Pat for a while, and I hadn't seen him for quite a while. And Kevin says, "Let's get to our seat. Let's go get a seat." He said, "I want to see the first pitch." So I'm following him. I don't know what's going on. We walk over right at the bottom of Gate H. There was a ramp that went down that the Zamboni would come out on the field to try and suck up some water and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that was right by the Phillies bullpen was there too. There was also a locker room there the city workers used, and I had a locker there with all my stuff in it later on when I lived there. But and the Phillies, if they needed a bathroom, they could just go up that ramp. Sometimes you'd be in there, you know, doing something. You hear these cleats coming, you know, across the floor, and you knew it was one of them. So we walk over there and we start down the ramp. And as we start up the ramp, there was a high school band that had played just before the game, and they were out in the field. They were leaving the field. Players were coming on the field, and they're playing their music as they're trying to get off. And they're four abreast coming up the ramp in some formation. I stepped aside and I thought, we're just going to let these people go. And Kevin says, "Follow me." And he walks into the middle of them, and he walks between two of the ranks, walking down. They're going one way, we're going the other way. They're playing their instruments. I got high school kids playing some kind of a tuba, but their eyes looking at us were like the size of a baseball. Like, what's going on? And when we got to the back of them, there was some jam up where they had stopped going up the ramp, and the back half of them, about 60 kids, were out on the field, marching in place, playing their music, and we're walking between them. You can't see us yet. Now we come out the back, and we're out in right field by the wall, walking down the right field foul line, and there's ball players. They're out in the field. They're throwing the ball around, and you know, around the horn. And the right fielder, he's looking at me like what? He stopped for a second and is tossing the ball and looked at me like, that's weird, you know, and then threw the ball and kind of ignored me. We're walking down the foul line, and there's about 50-some thousand people there. I've never been in this building, and I'm thinking, hot dog and beer my ass. I'm going to go to jail. This is going to be this is going to be handcuffs and calling my lawyer. And I didn't even have a lawyer. So we walked down there, and he goes up to when the stadium opened, they used to have a picnic area next to the dugouts on the ground level where people a group could buy group sales and go in there and bring their own food, baskets of food and stuff like that, you know, and have and there were some bleacher seats in there, but they were miniature bleacher seats. They were only about 8 or 9 rows high, and they weren't really wide, but they were for the people to sit on so they could see further out into the field. And he walks up to the gate. There's a security guard. I am having a fit. I think we're in deep doo-doo. And he walks up to the guy, and the first words out of Kevin's mouth are, he yells at me, he says, "Open the gate, hurry up, the game's about to start." The guy looks at us and he yells, "Yeah, hurry up, get in here, the game's about to start." And he opens the gate. We walk past him. Kevin does a fist bump with him. They smile and laugh. And we go inside and climb these bleachers and sit on the top thing. And we're sitting there. I said to Kevin, I looked around and said, "What the hell was that all about?" He says, "If you're out on the field before the game, nobody's going to question you. You're somebody. They don't recognize you, but you're somebody. You know, you just can't be there otherwise." So we sat there and we watched the game. And the first couple pitch, the guy hit a ball. It was foul, but just a little bit foul. But it was went into the 300 level seats, right by the left field foul line. And when I sat there that first night, my first time at the vet, I never knew that probably a couple years later I'd be running the parking lots and I'd be living right under where that ball went, because that's where the seats were. Right in left field, near the foul line, in fair ball territory, but under the 300 level seats. And it was cool.
Tom, I was a ex-Philly game day employee, so I remember I started at the vet my senior year of high school, and I recall where you're because the host Usher's locker room, I believe, was right in center field somewhere back there.
I had no knowledge of that. I don't know. I think the stand. I think that the section of between the two alcoves next to me was I don't know. It was probably a concession stand or a restroom, and then there would have been men's room, ladies' room, and then it would have gotten back into the rotation.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that, and that might have been over by the Phillies offices too.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I mean, you always heard the players always talk about, seeing mice and rats and cats. Like, how did you encounter?
I didn't. Listen, I was in Vietnam. We used to call the mosquito nets rat nets, because when you got into the bed, you tucked the mosquito netting under the mattress so your body weight kept it snug. And it was like a trampoline for rats and mice at night and stuff like that, and snakes. I mean, mud. None of that stuff bothered me. That said, I didn't have any rats. I didn't have any food in there. I never, if we had so much as a pizza, and I had food all the time, but if we had any kind of food, when we were done, it went in the refrigerator. And if it didn't go in the refrigerator, it went out of the building in a dumpster outside, nowhere near me. So I had nothing to bring. I had nothing to bring the rats and mice. Plus, remember, this is 1979, 80, 81. So the vet is in its first decade. It's only, 10 years old. I wasn't around for that other stuff because my life moved on, after in the 80s. But
Right.
I never had any. I never saw a rat or a mouse in the secret apartment. I'm not saying they were never there, but they didn't have. They couldn't eat.
Right.
There's nothing there for them. And they could go elsewhere and find something.
No, I just always remember hearing the different players talk that they've seen all kinds of different,
Oh yeah.
rodents and whatever in there. Just to
Well, they
touch
probably
on
had.
that.
I had a low threshold on all that stuff. It didn't bother me.
Okay. What is the significance of your uncles getting you into the vets?
They didn't. Oh, they did. Well, they. I was hired by my cousin Terry. Nylon Brothers, my uncles. That's a pretty interesting chapter there too. Those guys. After World War II, Bob was in the South Pacific. His brothers were on the out on the boats. They were merchant seamen taking stuff to England and stuff like that. But they didn't. One brother had a job. He came home one night because they did potluck suppers. They were all starting families. They had no money, and they were doing anything they could. And they'd get together and they eat together at night and have a potluck dinner at one of their apartments. So Joe comes home. He got a job in a construction site, and he just made the offhand comment. He said, it was so cold out there today. He said, those guys would have killed for a hot cup of coffee. The next day, they were selling coffee through a hole in the fence out there. And they made like $20-some that day and ran right to the Acme or A&P to get more food for the next day. And that's what they were doing. And then after a while, the guy that owned the construction site came up to them and he said, you cut a hole in my fence. And they admitted it. And he said, listen, he said, I'd rather have these guys coming up to you for a sandwich and something like that here than going down the road to a tap room and coming back half drunk or not at all. He said, all kinds of issues happen. He said, if you want to put a little trailer there, you can do it. So Bob, through a contact he had in the Army, he bought 3 surplus Army trailers. They were green, and they modified them, and they were able, the deal was you had to buy 3. So because they had 3, they started other construction sites. But that's how they started. And within a couple of years, they got the contract for the Army-Navy game. They went from a hole in the fence on a construction site to 105,000 people with fat wallets. And I can still remember them counting about, I think it was $33,000. That's what my memories is, in small bills, 5s and 10s and 1s, on my mother's dining room table, and laughing like the world had ended. And for them, in many ways, it had. And after that, they took off and became, with golf tournaments and other things, one of the biggest, in a certain era in the 50s and 60s. They were pretty big. And then they got Vet Stadium in 1971. That was a 15-year run. The parking contract was a 10-year run, and they ignored that because they had so much to do just getting their operation off the ground. Somewhere in 1976 or 70, probably in the spring of 1977, Joel Ralph, the commissioner of Parks and Recreation, came to Bob and said, Bob, I know you've parked thousands of cars for the Army-Navy game. That's 105,000. I know you can do this. He said, I'm stuck. He said, we had to fire the guy that was doing the parking. He said, he's out. He said, we don't have time to do other things. He said, the Philly season starts in another week. Can you do it? So Bob took over the 10-year contract, which ran from 1971 to 81, not like his 15-year contract, which took him to 86.
Mm-hmm.
And in 81, they came up to a competitive bid, and we were outbid by a company we didn't think knew what they were doing, because they put in a bid for about 10 cents on the dollar, 10.1 cents on the dollar. And Nyland Brothers were working at that time at 14.9 cents on the dollar. And they made money. They made good money because we parked a lot of cars. But it was tough. And if you had a really bad winter with a lot of snow where you had to bring in other people to clear the lot, which had to be empty, if we had deep snow for an Eagles game, we could lose our margin of profit even. And that's what happened. And so Terry took over and ran the parking. He hated it. And about a year or two into that, I was working for him, just dead-end jobs and writing my novel about Vietnam and all that stuff. And Terry said he was leaving, and he said, you're going to take over. I said, what do you mean I'm going to take over? I didn't want this job. And they gave me the job, and I took it because it didn't seem like that bad, and it was good money. So I took the job, and that's how I ended up running the parking lot.
As a little kid, I was member Nylon Brothers, and then I believe it was ARA services, and then Aramore.
Yes. And somebody else was always in the spectrum. I forget who that was.
I think it was ARA services. I believe.
I think you're right. I think you're good. Yeah.
Tom, just besides, seeing the Eagles and the Phillies, was there like any other moments that like really stood out to you that you could recall at the top of your head that most memorable?
Well,
from your time.
And I got to know Tug McGraw and got to be a drinking buddy with Tug too. And Tug never knew about the secret apartment when he was playing, but years later, through his buddy John McManus, who told him about it and had been there a lot. And McManus is in my book too. There's just something in there about when he came down for the Syracuse game when his father died. But my favorite play, and Tug, I'd seen a film of him doing this with some group he was talking to. Tug said that when there's one out, there was one out in the last game of the World Series. It was Game 6, I think, and that's when the ball, there was a pop fly, and the ball popped out of Bob Boone's glove. He put his glove out. It was just a gimme, and as he put it out there, it popped, hit his glove and bounced out again. And Pete Rose was standing right there to barehand that. Right. And then he tossed it back to Tug. He might have bounced on the ground even, and threw it to Tug. And he gave him he put up one finger, like, we need one more out. We win the World Series. Tug told me that when he was ready to make that, when he had the last guy there, and it was a good hitter up there. I can't remember his name.
Willie Wilson.
Okay. This guy was a decent hitter. And I think there might have been men on base too. I'm not sure. But when he was pitching to him, before he pitched him, he looks over, and on third base, there's Mike Schmidt standing there. And the Philly police had brought in policemen on horseback. They rounded the field. They were all around the field on horseback, ready to stop people from coming out in the field. And a horse in a crowd is an incredible crowd control. I mean, they're pretty formidable. He's looking over at Schmitty, and right behind Schmitty, Schmitty's in his position, like ready, to be ready to, the third baseman pose. And the horse right behind Schmitty lets go a steaming pile of what. And Tug's looking over at him, and Schmitty's looking back, but Schmitty doesn't know what's going on behind him. And Tug breaks up. He's trying to, he had a good sense of humor anyhow. Right. He's trying to just control himself, and get back in the game. And he said it took him out of the game. He said, but it also kind of like took all the pressure off. It was this kind of like cosmic moment of madness, and there's Schmitty about to get hit with a whiff of something bad that's blowing his way. And oblivious to the whole thing. And that was one of my favorite. That when Booney caught that ball and all that other stuff, and then Schmitty on third base and the horse, that was kind of like one of my favorite times.
Now, I got another time for you I want you to talk about. I guess you had went to bed in a rain delay,
Oh, it
and you
was,
woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning
it was,
and
yeah.
in your bathrobe and everything. Talk about
Well,
it.
well, I probably didn't even have a bathroom on when I woke up, but I remember being out there and sitting in the outside of the railing there, in the 200 level seats in fair ball territory, and watching the game. And it ran on, and there was a rain delay about 10 something like that, and it was going to be a doubleheader. And I knew from things I'd heard in the building, they were committed to getting these games in. I don't know why it was so important, because it was early in the season. They could have made it up, but they were going to do it no matter what. And so I watched the game till about 10:30, and the concession stands were all closing, and people were leaving and stuff like that. So I went to bed, but I could hear it on the radio. And I woke up, the radio was still on, and they were still playing ball. It was around 2:30 or something like that. So I grabbed my bathrobe and my flip flops, made a cup of coffee, and I walk out, and I'm walking down, towards, third base. And people are freaking out, not because there's a guy in flip flops and a robe, but because I've got a hot cup of coffee. And the concession stands have been closed for about 5 hours. And here I am with a hot cup of coffee. And I could have sold coffee for $10 a cup probably.
Wow.
But I didn't. I just said, oh, well, I gave him some bullshit story. And I don't want to blow my cover.
Hmm.
All right.
Now, there was, tell us about John McManus
Oh,
and Jay, what's that? Hawks?
let's see. McManus was he was a bartender at the TLA, and he was a bartender at the London, and also Rembrandt's, and maybe the Firehouse. And I was with McManus and Tug one time at the Firehouse, I think, and we were just talking. I think that might be the. Is that what you're talking about? That one?
No, I think it's the guy from Syracuse that came up.
Oh, the guy from.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, Jay Haight. Jay Haight was
Yeah,
arrested. Jay Haight was the guy. If you went to college, Jay Haight was the guy that you thought would not be alive at 30. He was such a hard party drug guy and all this kind of stuff. And McManus's father, somebody saw me, and they said, "Have you talked to McManus lately?" And I said, "No, I haven't seen him in a while." And his father's not doing well. His father has cancer, and he's in hospice. He has very little time. He says it's not going to end well. And he said, "Why don't you give him a call?" So I called up McManus. We're talking for a few minutes. I said, Saturday, Syracuse is playing Temple right here at the vet. I said, "Why don't you come down?" I said, "We'll get some hot dogs and beer, and we'll sit out there in the stands and have a good time. Take your mind off some of the things that, your pressure you got." So he came down, and we did that. We went over to the secret apartment. We smoked a joint. We drank a couple beers, and I went out, and we went out and sat in the seats, and we watched the first hit. We watched the first half. When it was halftime, we were heading back to the secret apartment for a beer and a joint. And we ran into a guy in the crowd who didn't have a shirt on. His body was painted orange. He was drunk as a lord. He didn't know where he was. And it was Jay Haight, this guy that John hadn't seen since college. And Jay was down there with a bunch of people from Syracuse. They had a bus painted orange. And if the games weren't too far away, they'd put a keg of beer in that thing and drive it to the game. And that's what they'd done. They'd come down from Syracuse to Philly. So we run into them the hallway, and it's like old time week. They're hugging each other and all. And every time he hugged John was getting his orange shit all over him. He's covered with it. He looks like he's, and Jay Haight looked like he was melting. And John said, "Hey Jay, you want to you want to smoke a joint?" And this guy's looking around. He's like, where we can do it. He's going to ready to smoke a joint out in the hallway. He said, "Oh no, not there. Come with me." So we weren't far from the secret apartment. We go over there. We open the door. We walk in. Now, when you walked in the secret apartment, it was all the space between one alcove and the next one over. It was long. And the ceiling sloped. Right when you came in the door, it was flat, real high, about 16 feet high. But then it started sloping the way it would with the seats above it. Right. So I would get a tractor trailer load a couple of times a year of parking tickets. These were the tickets of different colors and numbering sequences that the kids would put in your car when they took the $2 from you. They'd hand you a car, and you're supposed to put it on your rear view mirror. Most people just throw on the floor because they didn't go around checking for cars without them. So I would get so many of these. I had them all stored in the storage room. That's what the storage room was really for. I also had Ozzy's furniture in there and was living in there. But what I did was I rearranged the boxes. So when you open that door, all you saw on both sides for about 50 feet, at least, was a corridor of boxes. If you could get into there and walk to the far end of that, it looked like it ended right there, but it didn't. You could go to the right, but you could only see a couple feet because it was like a zigzag. And after a little bit of that, then you'd be in the secret apartment, but you couldn't just stumble into it. So if the door was open, anybody looked in, there was nothing to see. I mean, I think I had a kayak in there also on the 10-speed bike. But aside from that, you'd see those on the floor, but that's all there was. So we walk in there and we walk in the secret apartment. We go sit. John puts some music on the stereo. I get some beers out of the refrigerator. They're having a good time, haven't seen each other. We smoke a joint. It's wonderful. And Jay Haight hasn't said one word about where he is or what this is. It's like normal to him. We heard some noises. It was the fans getting ready and stomping on the roof and all that kind of stuff. They were getting ready for the second half. So I said, Jay, tell us where you are. I'll get some hot dogs and beers and go find you and your guys, because he's going to go back and get with his gang. He tells me where he thinks they are, and he starts to stand up. As he stands up, he gets almost to full height, and it's like the air went out. He sinks back down in sinks back in the chair, looks around, and goes, "Where are we?" He said, "Can I get arrested here? Where did we go? Are we in the stadium? Did we leave?" He has no idea. Jay Haight is a guy that at a concert in New York, coming back from a concert, doing acid and God knows what else, was stopped on the New York freeway by the state troopers, and he went through he went through a speed check there, and he got pulled over, and he's sitting there, and they got him outside the car, and the officer's looking at his license. He says, "It says here that you should be wearing glasses when you drive." Jay Haight says, "I have a prescription windshield." Cop looks at Jay Haight, and he says, "Do you know how fast you were going?" Well, Jay does what any of us would have done. Like, I forget, the speed limit was 55. So he says, "Oh, officer, I'm so sorry. I might have been going 57, 56. I'm so sorry. I'll watch it." The guy goes, No. He said, "We clocked you at 27 miles an hour." Jay Haight did not go home that night. He did not make it home that night. But this night, so we went looking for him, as we promised, with a bunch of hot dogs and drinks, and we couldn't find them anywhere on the 200 level. God knows where they were. And they're painted orange, and they're half naked. How could they hide at the vet? But we never found him. How he got to where we were and we ran into him, I'll never know. That was Jay Haight. He was something, man.
Tom, I wanted to touch on, a lot of people may not remember this, but remember outdoor soccer team called the Philadelphia Fury.
Yeah.
Now,
I bet on one of their games. I think Bill Murray and Gilda Radner and a couple of other people from New York owned that team, or they owned one of the teams, because they were up in the mayor's box for one of them. I know Bill Murray was there with Gilda Radner.
Did not know that, but I remember the Fury. I never went to see them, but were you living, in the secret apartment at that time? The Fury was.
Yes. There were a couple of soccer teams. There were a couple, and there was also professional softball. And Billy White Shoes Johnson was a ringer on that team. And they put up like another outfield with that fencing you see for controlling snow. They put that up so you could hit a home run, because you could never put one out of the park with a softball if it was a regular stadium. I remember that. I bet on one of their games. One time I went down to get my paycheck cashed at a bank that was about down by the food distribution area. And when I opened the door to my car to jump out, one of the stars, ran into the door of my car. He was trying to run between the cars. Suddenly I open the door, and he runs into it, falls to the ground, and he's in pain. I bet on the other team that night.
Did you?
But I lost the bet.
Did you happen to see any concerts when you lived in the secret
No,
apartment?
I think that no, they didn't have concerts. Well, yeah, we may think about that. No, I had concerts. Mine were the big concerts. I had the Grateful Dead at the JFK Stadium for 4 days in a row in June, the same time that the circus had come out of Madison Square Garden and come to the Spectrum for 17 days in a row.
Well, that must have been.
And I had the Rolling Stones. I had big concerts. But at the Vet, I think the first concert at the Vet was around 86. I was out of there. And I think it was Bruce Springsteen.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Now, another story I would like for you to touch on. A chapter called "A Cheese Steak for Ozzy."
Oh yeah. That's yeah. When the Ozzy came back, introduced Ozzy earlier. I talked about him. When Ozzy when Ozzy came back to Philadelphia, the whole team, his team, the Cardinals, they were all jumping in cabs and heading up to Bookbinders for a lobster feast on the night before the game. And they had a curfew; they had to be back by 9:30, 10, whatever it was.
Mhm.
But they were all heading there. But Ozzy had other plans. Ozzy wanted to go get a cheesesteak at Oregon Steaks, which he hadn't had, since he'd left town. And that was he wanted that Philly experience again. So when I picked him up at his hotel in my pickup truck, another guy jumped in. I don't remember his name. I talked to Ozzy recently. He doesn't remember the guy's name either.
Mhm.
But he was a white wide receiver, and they called him Lightning or something like that. And he was a real jumper. I mean, he was beautiful in the air. He was one of those. It was how it is with great receivers. So
Right.
this guy was with Ozzy because Ozzy had been talking about cheesesteak. So they were going to go get a Philly cheesesteak while everybody else was heading up to heading for lobsters at Bookbinders. So I pick him up and we go up there and we get some cheesesteaks, and Ozzy treats us, and we're across the street and we're eating on the hood of the pickup truck, and right there's a bocce court, and we're watching these guys play bocce ball, and all talking in Italian and all this kind of stuff. And it was like a great little Philly scene. We get in the truck afterwards because we got curfew over our heads, and Ozzy says, he said, I want to stop at that place you mentioned before we go there. And the guy with him had no idea what was going on. I think he was in his rookie year, and he'd never played at the vet before. So we go down by the vet and we're driving around, and I go up over the curb and around, drive on the curb for a while and go through one of the gates that's open, and a passenger gate, not a truck gate, and back over the curb and around the building and pull up my office. And we get out, and I go through my door. I take out the key, steel door, nothing on it, just unmarked. We go into my inner outside office. It's like a giant truck bay. Uh, I lock the door behind us. We walk across. I open the other door. We go into the inside, walk across the concourse, and come up to the door of the secret apartment. I open it up. We walk in. Guy doesn't say a word. He's looking around, hasn't said a word. Kind of like Jay Haight, but not quite.
Mhm.
And he walks in, and when we went through the maze of boxes and came out in the secret apartment, he just started laughing. It just hit him. He said, I can't believe this. So we sat there and we smoked a joint, and we had a couple of beers. And this is the night before the game. And the guy, we got ready to leave because they were saying, "Hey, we got to get back, and we can't be late. They'll fine and all this kind of stuff." But we had time to make it. And the guy says, "There's one thing I would have loved to have done tonight." He says, "But I guess we can't." He says, "I'd love to go out on the field." I said, "We can do that." So we take our beers, put out our joint, go down, and we're out on the field. And he can't believe how bad the AstroTurf is and what he's going to play on him. He's crawling around in his hands. He's going, Jesus God, this will end a career. He said, this is really rough stuff. And it was really pretty cool. But he was loving being out on the field the night before the game. We beat the Cardinals the next day. Ozzy caught a pass for a first down, a couple things like that, but he didn't do anything outstanding. But he did get in the game, and that was his fourth game in like his fourth year. So you had to play like I think four back then. It's different now, I'm sure. At least four seasons, and
Mhm.
then four
Get
games
his
into the
pension.
next season, and you would be guaranteed your NFL pension. It would be based on a lot of things, your salary and what how many years you played and all, but you'd be in the pot, you'd be there. And he got
Mhm.
that game playing as a Cardinal in Philly
In the
at the
vet.
vet, which was kind of special.
Mhm.
He just had a birthday. It's the same birthday. He and Dick Vermeil have the same birthday. I think it's October 30th, Halloween.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Interesting.
Mike.
Tom, I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about, not many people may know this, but you originally wrote a book about when you were in Vietnam.
It's a better book.
And you told me that, called Many Boku Magics. Can you
Yeah.
explain, touch on
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Yeah, well, yeah. I wasn't with Americans in Vietnam. I was with some Americans, but we were an A team. A Special Forces A team was 12 guys, and you could split the team down the middle because there were 6 jobs that were doubled up. So a team could do that. They could work as half a team and still have all the capacity. There were 2 commo men, 2 medics, 2 weapons men, 2 demo construction guys, and 2 officers, usually a captain, CO, and a first lieutenant, XO. And you could split the team right down the middle. And they were the only Americans in the camp. Everybody else was a mercenary because I paid them every month. They weren't in the service of Vietnam. They weren't in the Vietnam military. They were mercenaries. They were called Montagnards. That was their name. They were mountain people. And I had about 400 of them, I think, on my payroll. And that I led them with 1 other American on combat operations on the Cambodian border in the summer of 1968. In the fall, I was switched to an even worse camp that had just been overrun.
Yeah.
Okay, now you listed 2 of your favorite memories as the 1980 World Series and the 1981 NFC title game. Talk about those for me.
Well, I did. That's what we were talking about. One was when Wilbert made that breakthrough, and took that run, and that some people can still see that in their mind's eye. That was beautiful. And the other one was when Pete Rose caught that ball, and then Tug had to deal with the humor and the madness of a horse taking an outrageous crap right behind Mike Schmidt. I mean, it was right. The horse had moved up, and if Smitty backed up a couple feet, he would have been standing up to almost to his knees.
Okay. Before Mike goes, talk about McManus and McGraw friendship.
They were buddies. They were very close. John was a bartender, and Tug had left his wife. I think he had 2 or 3 kids, and he left his wife and moved to Fairmount. He was living on Peyrose Street, which was right behind the London up in Fairmount. And he met McManus, who was a bartender, but McManus wasn't your average bartender. McManus had a PhD. McManus wrote books that they're still studying in Western Australia and things like that. And they was interesting, and they got to be buddies. And John never called him Tug. He always called him Frank. Always called him Frank. But they were close buddies, and they were kind of inseparable, those 2. I mean, it was like a bromance. I mean, they were both straight guys, but they were best buds.
Mike?
So I want to just touch on I know we talked about this earlier, about you were possibly in the works of coming out with a 3rd book. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. I'm writing a book now. It's called The Long Ago Girl, and it's about the girl of my dreams. I said I got married when I was 50, but I met Peg when I was 40 down in Wildwood, of all places. Sometimes when things get rough, we echo that line from Casablanca where Humphrey Bogart says, we'll always have Paris. Well, our line is we'll always have Wildwood. But I met Peg in the summer of 1983, and we've never been separated. She's across the room from me now, and she's just a wonderful person. I mean, she's one of the best people I ever met, and I just thought she was so beautiful. I just can't take my eyes off of her. And I'm writing that story now about meeting her, and it's a good one. It's a really good one. I'm not going to get into it any much more than that.
Right.
But it's I'll tell you the story sometime. It'll blow your mind. I don't make anything up. That's the other thing. These books I don't make it. I don't have that kind of imagination. But things have happened to me that after a while I realized, hey, that's just not normal.
You know, good. I was talking to Mike before you came on, and I was telling him about I read the book, and I said, if he can talk in a way like he wrote that book, it's going to be a great show.
Oh.
And once you started talking, man, like I said, you answered 20 of my questions before I got to ask. And I said, well, that goes to show you that this man, he wrote this book. This is not something that made up. This is something that comes from within him. And it was perfect, man. Perfect.
I got 2 letters from women, wives, that said their husband was dyslexic. And one woman, she lived in Florida, she said in their entire life together, she has never seen him read one book that he didn't have to read to get through school. And she said, he read your book. And she said, we didn't think he'd read it. He read it straight through. She said, he loved it. And she said, he's dyslexic and he has trouble reading, but somehow he could, and so somebody called me a dyslexic whisperer, because I had two dyslexic people come forward and say, I can read this because it's more conversational. It's not, when I was in college, I was an English major, and the Widener had gotten a new head of the English department from Penn, Dr. Diana Lesturgeon, and she was pretty impressive. Her credentials were wild, and she came in and took over the English department. She was one of my teachers, and one time she did say to me, and I didn't understand this. I don't understand it now as you say it. I know what you mean, but I don't quite get it. And she said, if you could only write the way you talk, she said, you'd be a great writer. And that's what comes out, and that's what I'm doing. But my stories are kind of like I'm talking to you.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, between not only, the secret department, but, you served in Vietnam in combat. It sounds like, you had a very interesting life. I mean, working on your third book now, and
it's wonderful,
amazing.
Well, it's a wonderful life, and it's been really good to be. And I survived all that. I was really lucky. If you ever saw, there's a movie by Mel Gibson back in the 90s, and it's called We Were Soldiers, and it's about one of the biggest battles in Vietnam. It's the Battle of the Ia Drang Valley, and it was right at this time of year. It was November 14th and 15th of 1965. We sent 2 battalions out to the border. We sent in they sent in artillery bases where they'd sling load a couple of 105s under a helicopter, drop them on a hill somewhere, clear it out a little bit, put some wire up, give them a platoon of infantry to protect them. And that was a fire base right in the enemy's backyard, shooting artillery right where they wanted it. They had the battle that ensued at that time. We lost over 300 kids in about 72 hours, less than 72 hours, 48 hours. And that remains the biggest battle and the greatest loss of life in the entire war. That was right at the foot of a mountain, which was filled with North Vietnamese. It was right on the Cambodian border. It was incredible. And so many people poured out of that animal. It's like, dealing with a beehive or something like that. And that was the biggest battle. They had B-52s at 1,500 foot intervals between them, from 15,000 feet to about 33,000 feet on top of them, ready to drop 2,000-pound bombs anywhere they wanted. That mountain was called the Chupong Massif. It was right on the Cambodian border. If you went up over that mountain to the other side and went about 10 miles, that's where my camp was 3 years later. That's where I ran operations with one other American and some Montagnards, 2 guys and some Montagnards, and then usually always an interpreter too.
Okay. We got about 5 to 7 minutes left. A couple of things, more things I wanted to ask you about, and one of the chapters called "The Hauling of Tug's Ashes."
Oh yeah, John was with Tug out at Tim's place in Tennessee, and with Hank McGraw. That was Tug's brother, older brother, and they always said a better athlete. He was a real maverick, and he was in the major leagues before Tug, and got Tug got them to look at Tug, and that opened Tug's career. But Hank was there, and John, and he said they were with Tug when he took his last breath. And when he died, he said, you know what he had in his left hand? I said, no, I should have known. He said, a baseball. He's holding a baseball. So they brought some of Tug's ashes back to Philadelphia, and they called up Bill Giles, and they said they'd like to put them in the pitcher's mound. So Giles said, sure, whatever you want. That's cool. So they came down there, and they went out and they did it, and they dug a place, and they put some ashes in the pitcher's mound. So I run into McManus up at my son Judd had a bar up in Fairmount called the Lucky Seven, which is the bar from Rocky. That's the name of the bar from Rocky. Yeah. Right. So I'm up at the Lucky Seven with McManus, and he's telling me all these stories about Tug and all that kind of stuff. And he tells me about burying the ashes. And I said, well, I read in the Daily News that they dug up the pitcher's mound and they moved it over to the new stadium so they'd have the dirt, all this dirt that they use all these years, and they'd use it again. I said, so did they get your ashes or did they leave them at the vet to be buried under the parking lot? And he looks at me, starts cackling and laughing, goes, he says, I don't know. He says, it doesn't matter. He says, Tug never knew where the hell he was half the time anyhow. But I don't know if they got I don't know if they got the ashes or not, but I know, yeah. And yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just
going
go
to
ahead.
say, did you happen to end up meeting Tim McGraw?
No, I never met Tim. He was up a couple times when he was in Philly. He was at the Lucky Seven, and he was there. Some of those guys. I know he went up there a couple times for drinks, but I never got to meet. No, I never got to meet him.
Okay. I just figured I'd ask.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk about instant replay.
Oh, the poem.
Yes.
My daughter was married. My stepdaughter Tara was married in Playa del Carmen in Mexico. It's about 40 kilometers south of Cancun. Mm-hmm. So that was scheduled. That's a long time scheduling, and that was set up for sometime around her anniversary is, I think it's around January 21st or 22nd. And when John died, it was right around Christmas. Tug and John both died the same year. Tug died in the spring, and John died right before Christmas. So John's burial, John was cremated, and they were going to have some of the guys in Fairmount, they were going to have a big deal for him up at Rembrandt's on the second floor. Mm-hmm. And I was supposed to be one of the speakers, and I said I'd do that all along. But when they came up and told me the date, I said I'll be in Mexico then. I can't miss this. I can't, be here for that. This is my daughter. I want to be with my wife and the kids and all. So I went to that, but I said I'll write a poem for you, and I'll give you the poem, and you can read that. And I have it. It's in the book here if you need it.
Right. Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Look, if you want me to read it or anything like that. But and instant replay was me imagining what it would be like, since they both died at the same time, for Tug and John to be at a bar up in heaven. But the bar was, when you at the back door of the bar, you could go out that door, and when you went through that door, you were in heaven. But they'd sit at the bar, and they loved it because John could smoke cigarettes in the bar, and he smoked like crazy. They could raise hell. They could smoke joints. They could, there was no tab. I mean, there were beautiful women in the bar. I mean, it was right outside of heaven. So it would be that kind of bar. Not that those two could necessarily make it to heaven. And that's the bar. And they're looking. Oh yeah, they're looking at their lives. Their lives are on the screen, a big screen TV behind them, and it's their life. But it's the highlights of their life. And Tug has the remote, and John's fighting to get the remote. They both want the remote, which makes sense to me knowing those two. And they're fighting over this and quibbling and watching this thing and laughing their ass off. And I think in the poem, John turns to Tug and says, "Hey Tug," he says, "Can we come again? Can we come here again?" And he says, "Every night, my boyo, every night."
Yeah.
Nice.
It's been a good time down there. I mean, I had a good time. I hid in plain sight. Nobody bothered me. Nobody wrote. There were a couple people. I'm not going to mention any names. There were a couple people involved in the vet who had positions of authority. If they had caught me, they would have drawn and quartered me. I mean, they would have wanted my head on a plate, but that never happened because those people, as in any business, nobody likes them. So, everybody at every level had some kind of story about those two, and so they've never ratted me out to that. There were some people that worked at the vet had a pretty good idea that I was just they'd see me coming right. I just got a shower somewhere and stuff like that. When it was
now,
good.
One last question for me. What made you, speaking of the book, what made you decide to write the book? And I think you call it an unintended memoir.
Unintentional memoir. Yeah. I didn't mean to write a book. I never set out to write a book. My son, Judd, who had the Lucky Seven, Judd told me for years, he said, "You got to write a book about the stadium." He said, "That's your money ball." He said, "That one will really do something." And it has gone worldwide. I mean, from a self-published book, That has, I've sold books in Japan, not a lot, mind you, but in
Mhm.
Japan, Great Britain, all over the world, New Zealand, Greenland, everywhere. I mean, all over Europe, South America. I mean, it's amazing, some of the contacts I've made with this. But I just started writing short stories during COVID and putting them on Facebook, stories that you're reading in the book, to send to friends, because we were all freaked out when COVID hit us. I mean, the death toll, we're starting to say this could be something serious.
Right,
And
right.
at the same time, they didn't have any vaccine. It's like, what are we going to do? People were staying home. I'd come home from the store shopping, and in the garage, take off all my clothes and put them in a trash bag, take them up, put them in the washing machine, and then go jump right in the shower and wash myself, and then go down and wipe off everything I bought in the store with a cloth. We were freaked out. So I thought this was a good thing to do. And I put a thing on Facebook that said, watch this spot. By the end of this month, March, I will start putting short stories on here for you. And I hope it entertains you and takes your mind off all we're going through. So the first story, this is typical of me, 20 minutes before midnight on the last day of March, I pushed the send button and I put a story out there. And people sent that story to their friends. You know how things can happen in that,
Sure.
And they said, and I was hearing comments and people loving this from people I'd never heard of, plus all my friends. And it really went crazy. So I kept doing it. So every couple of days or weeks, I would put a couple more stories in there. And by sometime in late June, July, I had over 30,000 words. And somebody said, you got a book here. You got to publish this. So I started working with Lois Hoffman down in Delaware to help me with it, format it. And she's the Happy Self Publisher, which was, she's really good. And you can find her online. She does that for people. And we put it out on the 3rd of December. I got a call from Skip Denenberg, who worked with the Phillies and wrote a lot of songs. He wrote the Ballad of Tug McGraw and a couple of other songs.
Right.
He wrote something called Concrete and Steel about the vet that the Phillies wanted, at the time, that was going to be blown up. They used that. Skip's pretty talented. And he called me up and he says, listen, Angelo Cataldi knows about this book. He said, Angelo Cataldi, and he said, I'm not throwing shade here. Angelo Cataldi is the cheapest man that ever lived. He said, he will never spend his money for your book, but if you got interest, you got to get him a copy of the book. I said, okay, tell me how to do it. 2 days later, before Skip could do anything, I got an email from Angelo Cataldi. Somehow, on his own, he tracked me down, had my email. He asked me if he said he loved the book. He was almost finished the book. This was on a Friday. He said, but he loved the book, and he said, would you be on my show? On Saturday, he must have finished the book, because he said he wanted me on a show next week. Could I do it? I said, sure. So I did it on Wednesday, the 8th of December. And if you ever look in the back, if you look on Amazon in the reviews of the book, the very first review of The Secret Apartment is signed Angelo C, just the letter C. And that's Cataldi, and that was the, and he wrote a really great review saying, like, the vet was, we had all these problems at the vet, but it was our vet, us.
Right.
And he put me on the air on the 8th of December, and I was on for about 20 minutes, and he was very kind to me. We had a good conversation, and after that, it got picked up by the local papers. Stephanie Farr did a really good article in the Daily News and the Inquirer. Then it got picked up by the New York Times, the Times of London, Manchester Guardian, some tabloid in England, I think it was the Sun or the Star, something like that, called me a bloke. It was a headline, said, bloke hides in stadium, doesn't get caught. I love being called a bloke. I thought that was really cool. Plus making the English papers. It was on CBS Saturday morning television. It was on NPR. A friend of mine calls from the Army, buddy calls me from Sacramento, California. He's driving home Saturday morning from the Y after a workout. Turns on the radio, NPR, and they're talking about my book. So, it was nuts. It was nuts. And the story about the story is, and I can't get into this with any details, but I'll tell you, backstage of you. But we sold the book after about a year to a major production company in Hollywood. And at that time, I'd been contacted by Mark Wahlberg's company, representatives of them. Yeah, Mark Wahlberg. Let's see, who's Steph Curry has a production company, and Norman Lear, and a couple of others. But I went with this company for some good reasons, and they put out in the fall no, yeah, yeah, in the some let's see, in the late summer, early fall, they put out what's called a sizzle, and a sizzle is a story that they tell using clips from other movies. Like there was Tom Hanks was in one of them, and a couple of things. There was a Stallone. I saw him, in a certain image and things like that. It's about 4 minutes long, and it's a teaser, and they send it around the industry to see if anybody wants to put some more money in this. And somebody, I think I told Mike, but somebody really major bought in, and it's all signed and sealed. So now, like, I have a Zoom tomorrow or Friday, I think, with some of them, and because they're hiring writers and they're looking for a director and all, and I'll be in on all these Zoom calls with them, doing stuff. Rob Nichol. Yeah, in the early days, when this one company was kind of wooing me, we had a Zoom call, and Rob McElhenney was in it, and he was telling me he wanted to play my part, and we're laughing about it. And then he said, but I'm too old, meaning himself.
Right.
And then
right.
he looked into the Zoom, and he looked at the camera, and he said, "How old were you when you were doing that?" I guess he thought I was really young to be so immature and crazy. I said, let's see. I was in my late 30s. I think I was about 38. That's, at that time. And he laughed. He said, "Oh, God, I could do that." He said, "I'm only 42. And we laughed about it. But now he's tied up with that Welcome to Wrexham and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So he's out. And the director they had is out because it's changed hands a little bit when it went with these other guys. And this is a Philadelphia guy that his name is so big. I mean, I knew he was big. I didn't know he was this big.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
yes, and he's short and he's black.
Really?
Very short, yeah. That's all I'll say. But he's cool.
Well, it's not to really get into how you got in touch with me. I mean, I was searching for you. That's how this came about when I gave my info and you got back to me. Which I was looking up because Al, like I was telling you, Al has his show called Inside Sports from the Driver's Seat, which Al knows a lot of Eagles, and he's had Charlie Manuel on, Larry Boa, and I've been in the podcasting for about 4 years, and I was we had Ray Dittinger on, just to name a few months ago.
Went to the same high school as me. I know Ray well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Ray. I graduated St. James in Chester in '61. I think he might be class of '66, something like that.
Okay. Matter of fact, I think we're going to try to get Mr. Dittinger back on, but it was just phenomenal, getting you on and you getting in contact with me, and I know Al was excited. He got your book off Amazon yesterday, and he pretty much covered the whole thing.
Well, actually, not really. I've covered, I think, the first 10 or 12 chapters.
Right.
And I'm on the next page here. It looks like you got about 20 chapters there. So
it's
I
fun.
would like to know, would you like to come on again to finish up your book?
Yeah. You know how to find me.
Okay, great.
We, we appreciate your, taking your time and
thank
coming
you.
on. It's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. Do I see Jaws in the background of that picture on your wall? Is that Jaws?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Jaws, Randall Cunningham. I think it's Norm Van Brocklin and Donovan McNabb.
Why are they all together? What? Wow.
I bought this picture probably about 20 years ago. Had it, it was wrapped up, never put it, and when I moved in my house, I got a frame for it, and I, did my Eagles man cave here. Matter of fact, what I can do, I'll take a picture of it and I'll send it to you.
Thank you. That's cool.
I mean, it's a rare picture. I've never seen it before. I'll send you a copy of it too, Al. It actually says Road to the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Yeah, Jaws was funny. I knew Jaws well. I
Matter of
remember.
fact, no, go ahead. I was actually going to say in the picture on his wristband, there's a picture of a shark with jaws on it, which I never even noticed until recent.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'll send you both the picture of it.
I remember walking out of the locker room with Jerry Sizemore and Stan Walters, and Jaws had about 7 or 8 reporters hanging around his little stall there. He was in his underwear, drying off with a towel, something would always, and he's laughing. They're having a good time. And when we went by him, he goes, "Oh, look," he said, "both of my offensive tackles are wearing the same outfit. Aren't they cute?" And Stan Walters looked at him and just said, "Jaws, what if I miss a block on Sunday? You know," he says, you can be wearing that, you know, and the look on his face, because, you know, you don't insult the people who protect you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Did you, no, we don't want to hold you up.
I'm not going anywhere.
I mean, did you were you friends with like a lot of the ex-Phillies and Eagles at that time?
Not Phillies. I mean, the Phillies weren't as approachable. The Eagles were the most approachable people ever. The first time when I was out in the parking lot one night working some other kind of game, Jerry Sizemore came out. We were talking, you know, for a little while, and somebody else was there. And he was talking about a cookout. It was around 4th of July, and they hadn't gone out to camp or something like that yet. And he said, "Tommy, why don't you come over?" He says, "Call my number." He says, "You got my number?" He said, "Call me, so I'll give you directions." And I didn't do it. I thought, you know, it's just something nice some people say. Next time I saw him, he was upset, and he says, "I thought you were going to call." He says, "I missed you." He said, "We had a great time," and all this kind of stuff. I said, "Oh," but so, and after that, we got really close, and I started going. I was down in Texas a couple times with him. When I left the vet, after it was all done, this is an end story. My contract for parking with the company that I work for, Nylons, ran up to the last day of 1981. So in 1982, we had to be out of there, at least there. They still had the concessions for 5 more years, but the parking had to be cleaned out. So I moved everything out, and I was gone. And I was collecting unemployment, looking around, figuring out what I was going to do. Didn't have a lead on anything good. I'd always been working dead-end jobs so I could write. And so I had this job, but it was a great job, and I got pretty good pay. And Billy Bradley was in town to pick up some furniture he had. He left it here when he played. It was in storage. And we were down at Walt's Crab Place on 2nd Street with Mike Studzinski, a buddy of ours, having some crabs and beer and all. And Billy kept saying, he said, "I'm going back to Texas tomorrow, my dad's pickup truck." He said, "Come on with me." He says, "Come on down. You have a good time." And I'm giving him lame excuse after lame excuse. Finally, he said, "Bullshit." He said, "Pack a bag, because I'll be outside your house at 7:30 tomorrow morning. When I beep the horn, if you don't come running out, I'm coming in there and I'll drag your ass out. So you're going to Texas, whatever you can put your hands on. Pack a bag." And he took me to Texas. We left on the 16th of February. It was about 25 degrees in Philadelphia. It was miserable. And we arrived in Austin, Texas, where he was living at the time. A week later, we didn't go in a straight line. Billy knows people everywhere. We met some fascinating people and stopped at all kinds of wild places. I know we spent a couple of days in Hot Springs, Arkansas, you know, and Billy had a story for every place and knew people. And that was the 16th of February. So a week later, I'm in Austin, and I came back Christmas Eve. I'd had the time of my life. I mean, it was one quick story about that. When it must have been Memorial Day weekend, because Sizemore was there, and he couldn't be there for the 4th of July. He'd be in camp, and he couldn't be there for Labor Day because he'd be in season. So it must have been Memorial Day, and we went out there from where we were staying in Austin for a long weekend. For us, was about 7 or 8 days. Hang out, sail. '80, so you couldn't get that on your phone. You know, you had to be there and push the button to hear the message. And the voice was, one of the voices was Darrell Royal, head coach of the University of Texas Longhorns, and Billy's coach when he was in college. And Darrell said, "Billy, why don't your friend come on out to my place this weekend? We're having a cookout with some friends." He said, "We'll have some good music and food." He said, "It'll be a good time." But we didn't know about it. We're on the other side of the lake. We could have sailed over there and joined the party at any time. We didn't know about it till it was over, so we missed it. But the friends, the music, that was Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings.
Jeez.
at this party, playing their guitars with just a small group of people. I could have smoked a joint with Willie Nelson.
Yeah, right.
It was,
Right.
and James Michener was at the party. I have something that Billy got. So I think it's dated. I think it's dated the 23rd of April, 1983. So I wasn't there, but Billy sent me this, and it's framed. It's from James Michener. It says, "Tom, keep on writing, please." James Michener. It's on Edith Royal stationery, which you must have grabbed for, the way to sign this thing.
Interesting.
Bill, if you want to read some interesting, you should read. There are a couple new books about Billy Bradley that just came out. One of them is Blue-Eyed Soul Brother, and the other is something about Bill Bradley. It's got a picture of him with real frizzy hair, when his hair was real wild. But Billy's high school career and his professional career, he never played on a winning team. He still has records that have not been broken since 71 and 72 in terms of interceptions. I mean, he was phenomenal. He was amazing, and he never played on a winning team. If he had, he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob. We're running out of time here. I want to take this opportunity to thank you so much. Did I say Bob?
Yeah, but that's okay. I'm from a big family. In a big family, you answer to anything.
Yeah, but I do appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
For those out there that are listening, we are talking to Tom Garvey, the man that lived in the vet for a few years and had his little secret apartment there. And that's what this show is about, and talking about the book. So again, on my behalf, thank you so much, Mike.
Okay. Tom, we appreciate it. It's amazing meeting somebody like you. Like I said, not only, living in the vet, but thank you for your service in Vietnam.
Oh,
not only soldiers don't get enough credit as they should. Very grateful. I've had, family that served World War II, Korean War. Appreciate it. But thank you for your time. Al and I appreciate it. Love to have you back.
Okay, I'll come back someday. Listen, thank you for the opportunity. And anybody wants it, it's on Amazon, and both books are. Just go Tom Garvey Amazon Books, and you'll find both books. And
Absolutely.
And if you got Amazon Prime, you can read them for free on your phone or whatever.
Okay. All right. Absolutely.
So if you read the book and you like it, tell your friends.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. Everybody,
Thanks, Tom.
this has
Guys, it was
been
fun.
At the 50 with Fuji and Fleet with my co-host, Mike Fuji, and our guest today has been Tom Garvey, author of The Secret Apartment. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Thank you, Tom.
Have a good night, and go Birds.
Peace out.
Go Birds.